There is DNA inside half the men in Europe that should not be there. It does not belong there. By every law of history, this blood should have stayed in Egypt. But it did not. It moved. It traveled. It crossed seas and mountains and centuries. And today, that DNA is inside millions of European men who have no idea that the deepest marker in their blood connects them to a king who died 3,000 years before they were born. His name was Tutankhamun. His genetic signature is not Egyptian. In 2011, a team of geneticists in Switzerland reconstructed the boy king's DNA. They analyzed his Y chromosome. Think of the Y chromosome as a surname passed from father to son, unchanged for thousands of years. Tutankhamun belonged to Haplogroup R1b1a2. A haplogroup is simply a large family tree branch. Everyone in that branch shares a single common male ancestor somewhere in the distant past. Today, that same branch appears in 50 to 70% of all men in Western Europe, in Britain, in Spain, in France, in Ireland. In modern Egypt, it appears in less than 1% of the population. The Pharaoh's bloodline is almost extinct in the land he ruled. It is everywhere in the land he never saw. Half of Western European men unknowingly carry the Pharaoh's distant family marker. This is not a metaphor. This is DNA sequencing, peer-reviewed studies, hard evidence. For 2 centuries, historians told a simple story. Ancient Egypt rose along the Nile. It was African. It was isolated. It built pyramids and buried kings in golden tombs. It stood apart from the world. That story is dead. In 2017, a team from the University of Tübingen and the Max Planck Institute sequenced the DNA of 90 mummies. They spanned 1,500 years of ancient Egyptian history, from the height of the empire to the Roman conquest. The results were devastating. The ancient Egyptians were not like modern Egyptians. They shared more DNA with populations from Turkey, from Syria, from Lebanon, from the Neolithic peoples of Anatolia in Europe. Modern Egyptians carry about 8% more sub-Saharan ancestry. Conquerors came, slaves were brought, migrations reshaped the genetic landscape over thousands of years. But the pharaohs themselves pointed somewhere else entirely. Researchers traced the origin of haplogroup R1b1a2. The common ancestor of every man in this branch lived about 9,500 years ago, not in Egypt, not in Europe, in the Caucasus Mountains between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Around 7,000 BC, that lineage split. One branch migrated west into Europe with the first farmers. It spread across the continent. It became the dominant male line of Western Europe. Millions of men from Dublin to Berlin carry this marker today. They have no idea their deepest ancestry connects them to the Caucasus. The other branch ended up in Egypt, in the royal family, in the pharaohs themselves. How did a lineage from the Caucasus become the ruling house of ancient Egypt? Geneticists admit they do not know. The path is lost. The migration left no trace in the historical record. No inscriptions, no monuments, no stories passed down. But the DNA is there, in the bones of the boy king, in the blood of half a continent. The Caucasus region was a crossroads for thousands of years. People moved through it constantly. Some went east into Asia, some went west into Europe, some went south into Mesopotamia and beyond. Somewhere along that southern route, a branch of this lineage entered Egypt. It may have come with traders, with conquerors, with migrants fleeing catastrophe, with mercenaries hired to fight for the pharaohs. However it arrived, it did something remarkable. It embedded itself in the royal family. It became the blood of kings. For centuries, the pharaohs married within their own families. They preserved their lineage. They kept their marker alive. And that marker came from the Caucasus. Then the empire fell. The Persians came. The Greeks came. The Romans came. The Arabs came. Each wave brought new people, new blood, new lineages. The old marker faded. It diluted. It almost disappeared from Egypt entirely. But not from the world. The men who carried that marker into Europe thousands of years earlier had spread across the continent. They had multiplied. They had become the dominant population. Their marker was everywhere. And when the pharaohs died, when their line ended, when their tombs were looted and their names were forgotten, that same marker was still flowing through the veins of millions in Europe. Every man in Western Europe who carries Haplogroup R1b1a2 shares a common male ancestor with Tutankhamun. Not a direct line from Pharaoh to present day, not a descent that passes through the royal court, but a shared source. A single man who lived 9,500 years ago in the Caucasus. That man had sons. Some of those sons went west, some went south. Their paths diverged, their worlds separated. Their descendants forgot they were ever connected. 3,300 years after Tutankhamun died, a geneticist in Switzerland looked at his DNA and saw the connection. The same branch, the same marker, the same distant family tree. This changes how we see everything. The ancient world was not separate. Egypt was not isolated. Europe was not disconnected. The same migrations shaped both continents. The pharaohs were not alien to Europe. They were distant cousins, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, but cousins nonetheless. Today, a man in Manchester carries a marker from the Caucasus. A man in Madrid carries the same marker. A man in Berlin carries it. They have no idea their deepest signature in their blood connects them to each other and to a king buried in the Valley of the Kings. The categories we use to separate ourselves are recent inventions. French, German, Spanish, Egyptian. These are flags and languages and borders. They are not written in the blood. The blood tells a different story. It tells of a time when there was no France, no Germany, no Spain, no Egypt, only people walking, people following rivers, people crossing mountains, people carrying their markers into places where no one had ever been. Some of those people ended up in Europe. They built villages and raised cattle and fought wars and passed their DNA down through thousands of generations. Some of those people ended up in Egypt. They built pyramids and worshiped gods and buried their kings in gold. Their paths diverged. Their descendants became strangers to one another. But the marker never died. 3,300 years after Tutankhamun died, his genetic signature is still here, still passing from father to son, still connecting the present to a past so distant it feels like myth. The boy king is not gone. His distant family marker is walking among us, in the DNA of half a continent, in the bodies of millions who will never know his name. A man in Manchester will never visit Egypt. He will never speak a word of ancient Egyptian. He will never worship an Egyptian god. But somewhere in his blood, there is a marker. Your father's father's father, 1,000 generations back, stood in the same place as the father of a pharaoh. The past is not dead. It walks beside us in every strand of DNA. The pharaoh's marker did not vanish. It crossed mountains, it crossed seas, it crossed centuries, and it is still here, inside half the men in Europe, waiting to be found. If you want to understand the hidden history written in your own blood, if you want to know where your ancestors really came from, subscribe to GenealogyX. We follow the evidence, we dig deeper, we tell the stories history forgot.